Greetings, Ranger Nation, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Pitch Please. A series that I blatantly didn't steal from Sequelisers and Jason Bischoff's Power Down plots. Not one bit, no. What I endeavour to do with this is to rewrite, redeem, and restore any given plot or piece of media that I felt was kind of lacking. And I wanted to begin with something near and dear to my heart. And as you can probably guess, I'm going to start with my favourite villainous characters from the long-spanning Power Rangers franchise, the Psycho Rangers. Since their first appearance in 1998, I have been obsessed with these truly evil Power Rangers. They weren't weird shadow clones or whatever Zed was making. No, these were pure, unadulterated, evil Power Rangers. So much so that they resulted in the very first on-screen death of a Ranger, namely Kendrix Morgan, the Pink Lost Galaxy Ranger. Unfortunately, that major victory was also their last on-screen appearance. There's been a lot of rumours going around as to where the suits and costumes ended up, but for the life of me, I couldn't find any information regarding a mysterious collector who supposedly bought them all up. And considering the brittleness of token costumes, especially from that era, it's probably safe to assume the suits are either entirely beyond repair or even destroyed at this point. The Psycho Rangers have made a resurgence in more modern times. As you can see, we have a full set of Psycho Rangers from Hasbro, and we also have Power Rangers the Psychopath, a original graphic novel by Boom Studios, and it's okay. It's mostly okay. It was written by Paul Alla and drawn by Giuseppe Cafaro, and it was okay. It was exceedingly okay. It wasn't outstanding, is what I'm getting at. And while I had my issues with Soul of the Dragon, the graphic novel that preceded it, I enjoyed it for the most part. Psychopath I was hyped for, and it didn't deliver on my expectations. Which brings me to why I am making this video. Because as well as giving the Psycho Rangers their own graphic novel, Boom Studios also created Psycho Green, the original Psycho Ranger, and gave him his own one-shot story called Psychotic. And that kind of drummed up some interest in me in writing my own version of the Psychopath, because that was a really interesting story. It explored the origins of a Power Ranger who was corrupted and eventually became a Psycho Ranger. And in the Psychopath, we get none of that. In fact, there's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thumbing of the nose line, suggesting that no one would care about who these people were before they were Psycho Rangers. And yeah, I took umbrage with that because I kind of want to know. So yeah, that's why I'm doing this now. It's going to be a little rough. I spent a long while kind of writing and rewriting my idea of what the Psychopath could be. I'm pretty sure it's not perfect by any means, and I know some people are going to have some issue with it, but I needed to get this out. And because Power Rangers Unlimited Heir to Darkness is set to be released soon, and I think the preview images show the Flashman suits used as jobber fodder for Astronomer, I felt I needed to get this video out sooner rather than later so it doesn't look like I'm stealing anyone's ideas. Which kind of spoils what I'm doing with, in all honesty. But I think you will be surprised by the direction I go and what I want to do with the story. And in true Sequelisers fashion, I'm going to be borrowing story elements from the original, changing a fair amount of things, and while it shares some of those story beats, you know the old story, history doesn't repeat, it rhymes. So I'm going to be putting my own spin on things, adding a bit to the lore, giving some cool dialogue and characterization to people, and hopefully by the end you guys will enjoy it and this video doesn't bomb. And in my mind, I see this as more of a 6-issue mini-series rather than an original graphic novel, because I feel I can give characters more time to breathe and give focus to characters as they come up. But the video isn't structured that way, so please bear with me. But that's my idea for this anyway. I will also be using some of Giuseppe Cafero's artwork within the video just as a visual aid. I mean no disrespect by editing any of it or saying that I fixed it. I think Giuseppe Cafero is a fantastic artist and his work on the Psychopath is very, very good. And I would use him for my version as well. So I think without much further rambling, here is my version of Power Rangers The Psychopath. We open on the planet KO-35, peaceful, serene and safe, as families and happy people go about their day. In the centre of the city, a spiralling marvel of architecture is suddenly carved diagonally by an unseen force. As the top half of the building slides off its former foundation, it explodes, casting rubble and debris in all directions. People run and scream as a ship decloaks and a strange being drops from its underside. It begins slaughtering innocents before security services arrive, announcing to their superiors that the Red Psycho Ranger has returned. Just as Psycho Red is leaping at the security commander, he is caught in the chest by a flying motor vehicle, ploughing into him and then into the ground, gouging a trench across the battlefield. A familiar blonde woman lands in front of the security commander, wielding an ornate dagger. The vehicle is thrown aside and Psycho Red rises once more, growling, "Astronomer. I'm called Corone now," she declares defiantly, unfolding her trans dagger into an energy bow and bringing it to bear against Psycho Red. "I don't know how you're back, and frankly, I don't care. Get off my planet." Psycho Red extends his hand into a claw and approaches slowly, calling out Astronomer's name once again. "I told you that's not who I am anymore," Corone responds, scowling. Still he approaches. Her hands tremble. While she is armed, she is without her Quasar Saber, and far more vulnerable than usual. Psycho Red stops in his tracks and looks at her quizzically. He sees her tremble and laughs, causing her to let the energy bolt fly from her bow. Psycho Red uses his superior speed to dodge, then dash behind Corone and knock her out. In a red-hued flashback, Psycho Red awakens to find Trek, the green Psycho Ranger, looking very worse for wear, fussing over him. His face is withered and scarred, remnants of the psycho armor beneath his tattered poncho. "Ah, you're finally awake. Took you long enough, Red. Or would you prefer your old name? Do you even remember it?" Flashes of Red's former life play out. A scene of him in his Triforian Battalion uniform, looking very much like the Dynaman suit, fighting General Havoc and losing, splitting into 3 forms: courage, fear, and rage. And finally we see his dead other selves before a smiling astronomer. A creeping rage infects Psycho Red as Trek continues to monologue about how useless Psycho Red and the other Psychos are. That they're pale copies of Trek, and Red especially, because he's seen himself die before and should really know how to avoid it. That his rage is no match for cunning and long-term planning, and that is why they will always fail. While Trek, the original Psycho, will make them into something better, make them whole again. He just needs one final piece to make them better. Psycho Red breaks free from his constraint and clenches his hand around Trek's throat. Back in the present, Corone awakens in the same medbay as the flashback. To her right are 3 more beds containing Psychos Black, Blue and Yellow, while a mysterious human-like figure examines a datapad at the foot of the furthest bed. "Good to see you awake, O Princess of all evil," the man says quite sarcastically, putting down the datapad and approaching her bed. Corone asks where she is, and the stranger explains that they are aboard the Neji, and that while it may look like a twisted bundle of abandoned Magitech and Quadrifighter parts, it's a fully functional warship, quietly adding, "It's what happens when you leave a Zybrian unattended on a moon for decades." Corone, clearly confused, asks for further details. The mystery man explains that he knows she might have forgotten, but they were not the first Psycho Rangers. Corone asks who he is again, and the man grins as he is engulfed in a reddish-black aura. Armour seems to grow out of his skin, accompanied by sickening bone crunches and pained howling screams. Before Psycho Red stands before Corone. "How could you forget your first?" Corone realises what he means and can only mutter "how?" And Psycho Red takes great glee in answering that, just like the Pink Galaxy Ranger Corone herself replaced, the morphing grid returned him to life, and now he wants to use Astronomer's own powers to resurrect his comrades. It's the least she could do after her and her friends murdered them last time they met. Corone says they were just defending themselves, sending Psycho Red into a rage, cursing and spitting as the armour turns grey and flakes off of him like a dead carapace. "Were you defending yourself when you killed my others? When you murdered my team? By all means, Astronomer, justify how turning San of Triforia into me was defending yourself." Corone slumps to her knees as the full brunt of her guilt hits her. What she did as Astronomer and what she's ultimately been trying to atone for, creating the Psycho Rangers. She asks what Psycho Red wants, and San simply smirks, holding up the datapad showing Psychos Black, Blue and Yellow, and 3 planetary locations. We cut to the war room aboard the Astro Megaship Mark II, as Andros, Corone's brother, and his partner Ashley brief an assortment of familiar characters on a huge bank of monitors in front of them. Andros finishes explaining the situation and how he wants help to rescue his sister, but some are not so willing to help. Anubis Kruger growls at the notion and cuts his communication link. The Blue Centaurian recuses himself as well, because, while he respects Andros, he cannot aid a criminal who escaped justice, both referencing the Trial of Astronomer story. Delphine of the Equation Rangers, Maya of Miranoi, and Trey of Triforia do offer their assistance in searching for Corone, while TJ and Cassie say they'll cut their space vacation short and be back as soon as possible. Zane is on KO-35 helping with the relief effort, but will join the search as soon as possible and signs off, leaving Andros pinching the bridge of his nose. He laments the loss of 2 influential law enforcers, but is ultimately glad he can count on his friends and fellow Rangers. Ashley reassures Andros as Carlos bursts in, saying that the Psycho ship was spotted heading towards the planet Yotoba. Andros calls out to the ship's computer to set course, but we hear the order through the monitor of an unseen eavesdropper who plots an intercept course. On the planet Yotoba, in a rundown industrial area, San and Corone walk with a horizontal pod that hovers gently above the ground. Corone pulls at her restraints a little, drawing San's attention. He reiterates that once she's helped revive his comrades, she'll be let go, as he comes to a stop and opens the pod of Psycho Black. She insists that what he's asking is impossible. She no longer has the powers of astronomer. San simply rolls his eyes and produces a device that emits a high-pitched whine that causes Corone to collapse, clutching her temple. San sneeringly explains that he is reactivating her cybernetics and that while the Z-Wave may have deactivated them, they are still there, just under the surface. This continued jeering angers Corone to her breaking point. She screams and lets loose a pulse of dark purple energy that shatters her restraints and is seemingly absorbed into Black's pod. While Corone collapses unconscious, San goes to Black's pod as his armour flakes away, revealing a blonde, human-looking man. A moment later, he gasps for breath and rises, setting himself on the edge of the pod. San asks if the man is okay, and he replies with a weak salute. Griff Daunter, reporting for duty. In a purple-hued flashback, we see Griff Daunter on the planet Yotoba, training and being inducted into the Dragonic Blitz Rangers, the planet's elite military force, their design influenced by the Sentai Changeman. Yotoba warred with and ultimately fell to Dark Spectre's forces. Impressed with the Blitz Rangers' tactics in combat, Griff was personally tested in combat by Ecliptor for the role of second in command of the Psycho Rangers. He fights hard and is rewarded by being cut down from behind by Astronomer. Back in the present, San exposits to Griff that the site of his first death is the site where he needed to be resurrected, and that the connection needs to be re-established between the remaining Psycho souls that reside in the Morphing Grid and their cyborg bodies that are currently on the Neji. Corone awakens and is being tended to by Griff while San begins prepping another pod. Griff calmly explains that San's hatred towards Corone is twofold. San hates Astronomer for turning him into a monster, but his psycho programming hates Corone just for being a ranger. Corone reiterates that she is no longer Astronomer, but Griff counters that she still is to them, and this is just another of her infamously vain image changes, that she can't change who she is as easily as she dyes her hair. Corone questions how they knew her implants still worked, and he taps his head, informing her that theirs, the Psychos, are the same kind of cybernetics, and theirs still do. Every bit of programming, every bad thing you ever made us do. All right here, Griff states, sadly. Just under the surface, Corone mutters to herself. Days later, we see Carlos morphed and utilising his suit's scanning abilities to confirm to the Space Rangers that Corone was here on Yotoba, and that some sort of energy residue is present. Again, we see someone listening in, but reveal that it is none other than Anubis Kruger and the Blue Centaurian. In a split of a montage and a flashback, we see Corone reluctantly resurrect Psycho Yellow on the planet Elandria, alongside the yellow-hued flashback of a yellow lightning response ranger named Hera, the design reminiscent of the Sentai Maskman. She fought bravely to buy time for an escape shuttle with her team and Elandrian survivors to escape the Machine Empire, represented by Automon and Tesla from Forever Red, only for the shuttle to be destroyed and Hera captured. Back in the present, a week later, we see Corone and Hera sparring, both a little competitive but seemingly on good terms, Griff and San shouting encouragement to their respective favourites. Corone has begun to slowly ingratiate herself with the reborn Psychos, whose behaviour has mellowed quite a bit. Suddenly, the alarms begin to blare and the room shakes violently, causing the crew to rush to the bridge as a message echoes through the comms. The voice of Anubis Kruger. He demands that they all surrender, even Corone, much to her shock. A daring space chase ensues as the Neji dives down onto a nearby planet with Kruger's ship in pursuit. Griff is quick to point out to the Neji's pilot, Hera, that the ship is still mostly built from scrap, and soon the inertia starts stripping much needed systems. Hera brings the ship to a gradual crash in a snowy biome of the planet, and the crew quickly disembark to find Anubis Kruger and the Blue Centaurian awaiting them. The Blue Centaurian begins reciting which articles of intergalactic law were just broken, only to be cut off by Anubis, who makes it clear that Corone will finally face justice for what she did as astronomer. San and the rest of the Neji crew step forward to protect Corone. She looks shocked that they'd be so willing to defend her, to which Griff offhandedly remarks, "Once a ranger." The Neji crew take up appropriate fighting stances for their original pre-Psycho ranger identities. Corone smiles to herself, bemused, and repeats, "Always a ranger." The fight that ensues is pretty one-sided, and while Kruger and Centaurian are able to hold their own for the most part, the 2-on-1 odds eventually wear them down and force them back, but Corone presses her attack on Doggy Kruger, knocking him to the floor as the others stand ominously behind her in silhouette. "We don't want to fight, Kruger. For your sake," Corone initially pleads, but her next words are uncharacteristically cruel as we see her shadow now loom over Kruger's face. "Don't fight another war you won't win." Anubis growls as Centaurian teleports them both away. Relieved, Corone thanks the Neji crew. San says he only did it because they need her to get Blue back. Griff shrugs at San's comment as if not fully agreeing, and Hera starts swearing at the now snow-clogged engines. In another mix of montage and flashback, we see Corone is no longer shackled, reviving Psycho Blue of her own accord, and they are revealed to be a Furnovian shapeshifter named Purine. Despite their brutish appearance, they begin weeping and Corone instinctively cradles them, crying herself. In the flashback section, we see a battle between the humanoid form of Tankenstein and the Blue Prism Ranger, whose design is based on Flashman. The Ranger is ambushed by Quantrons and taken as a slave. Back in the present, 6 days later, the crew of the Neji are bonding over a meal, sharing jokes and laughing at Purine's shape-shifting shenanigans. Hera's autopilot sounds off again, alerting the crew that the ship has reached its final destination, the desolate world of Rashon. "So this is where Pink died?" Purine asks, and Corone furrows her brow. It's also where Kendrix Morgan, Corone's predecessor, died saving a fellow ranger from Psycho Pink. Hera asks San what their play is, and he says that they're just there to mark her grave. He explains that her body could not be recovered due to it being destroyed after being exposed to the destructive energies of the Savage Sword. Corone is offered the choice to stay on the ship if she so wishes. This is more of a symbolic gesture than something that they actually need her for. She says that she would like to finally put this whole chapter of her life to rest, if they'd let her. The Neji crew agree, and the ship descends onto the planet. As they approach the site of Pink's destruction, Corone's vision begins to warp as it has at several other points throughout the story in a visual way. Her perception wavers and she sees the Neji crew as the Psycho Rangers. They look at her quizzically but continue on at her insistence. The Neji crew reach the stone that once held the Savage Sword and encircle it solemnly. "Should we say something?" Purine asks, looking at the others. "I didn't really know her," San frowns. "None of us did." "I did," Corone mutters. "Her name was Wind." She goes on to explain, in a pink montage with slight green vignetting, that Wind was manipulated by Astronomer, that she preyed on Wind's more callous nature, upon her resentment of her leader and love interest, and turned Wind to the side of evil after getting her to kill her own team, the Star Squadron Rangers. This scene will mimic the events of the comic Psychotic, but sub in Die Ranger designs in place of the supersonic Rangers. The Neji crew all stare at Corone, as she double takes confused. She shakes her head and says that Wind was actually absorbed and kidnapped by the Globber monster, but the story she referenced was actually someone else's origin. She just couldn't remember. She's suddenly cut off by a swift chop to the back of her neck by San. "Poor Astronomer," an unseen voice mocks. "You just didn't quite piece it together quick enough." but I will admit, it was fun to watch you try to redeem these puppets. Corone hazily looks around to see the 4 morphed Psycho Rangers and a very much alive Trek looming over her, hearing him chide her before she passes out again. You were never on the path of redemption, my dear. You were walking the path I laid for you. Corone awakens inside a strange machine on the same spot. The Psycho Rangers are stood facing away from her like sentries, and Trek is toying with the device. Her protestations earn a chuckle from Trek, and he explains that after healing in a Zybrian meditative state and cobbling together the Neji to escape Earth's moon, he tried to make his way back to Dark Spectre's seat of power, but he found the universe very different from what it had been. As well as the United Alliance of Evil's fall, he also found out about the Rangers made in his image by an evil empress named Astronomer. He was also quite disappointed to find out she'd reformed. So he hatched a cunning scheme to bring back his departed kin, beginning with Red. The resurrection process wasn't perfect though, and it took an enormous toll on Trek to bring back a single Ranger. The cyborg body now infected with the soul of San. Trek, learning what he could from Red's memories, constructed this entire scenario to use Astronomer's powers to resurrect the remaining Psychos and then control them using his innate psychic abilities, all the while sequestered in a secret compartment of the ship. Trek even adds he's been subtly prodding at Corone's mind to make her more susceptible too, to coax out her dormant persona. Now, between his machine, a little trick picked up from a deceptive wizard in Dark Spectre's employ, and the lingering, resonant energy of the site, he'll not only complete his goal of resurrecting the Psycho Rangers, but also bring Dark Spectre's favourite daughter under his control. Trek flips the switch and energy begins crackling wildly as Corone screams, earning a slight look back from Psycho Red. The machine pulses, and in a harness on the opposite side of Corone, a humanoid figure begins to form out of the energy being siphoned from her. A loud rumble accompanies a sandstorm being kicked up by the Astro megaship's arrival overhead. The underside hangar doors open, and the Space Rangers drop from above, standing ready on the ridge above the site. Psychos, destroy them! Red, protect the machine! Trek commands, and the Rangers engage as best they can. During the fight, with the Psychos not operating to their fullest while Trek's focus is split, Andros manages to make a break for the machine and comes to blows with Psycho Red. In their struggle, Psycho Red tosses Andros into Trek, breaking his concentration. The Psychos, now free from Trek's overt control, react to Corone's continued screams and rush towards the machine. Before any of them can reach it, however, it explodes into purple and pinkish light, blinding those in the blast radius. As the dust begins to settle, the ringing in everyone's ears subsides, and Corone, battered and bruised from the explosion, sees a figure emerge from the chaos. She asks who it is, and the answer she receives is chilling. I'm stronger than you, faster than you, smarter than you. Before Corone stands Astronomer, reborn. And I'm back! Corone stares in shock at her former identity, a literal ghost from her past come back to taunt her. Trek suddenly appears, brandishing a crude imitation of Astronomer's Wrath Staff, and declares that Astronomer will not only serve him, but join the Psychos as his obedient warrior. Astronomer almost rolls her eyes at this notion, before glancing at Trek dismissively. The staff is wrenched from his hands and flies into hers before she swings it, cutting him in twain. I hate when people interrupt me, she smirks down at Corone, and I hate sharing my toys. Astronomer strikes a powerful stance and is engulfed in energy, before reappearing in a slightly more ornate set of pink-purple with silver trim Psycho Ranger armor. Think the Ranger Slayer from Drakon New Dawn, but as a Psycho Ranger. Astronomer laughs and commands, "To me, my Rangers." The Psychos flank Astronomer almost instinctively as Andros recovers Corone, bringing her to the other Space Rangers. A shout rings out and Zane appears above them on his Galaxy glider, landing and joining the Space Ranger lineup. Zane produces a wrapped object and presents it to Corone, saying that Maya thought she might need it. Corone unwraps it to reveal her Quasar Saber. Upon contact, her Transmorpher appears on her wrist, and Corone stands side by side with her brother Andros. "You're seriously going to fight me, Corone?" Astronomer goads. "I'd usually say that would be suicide, but it feels a little on the nose. I've been running from you ever since I was hit by the Z-Wave. But even after being given a second chance to live my life the right way, to be a force for good in the galaxy, I am constantly reminded that I will forever have the shadow of your evil hanging over me," Corone responds. Andros looks at the determined Corone with a twinge of guilt and sadness, as if recalling his own actions during her trial. "But honestly, I'm going to enjoy beating you back into whatever dark corner of my mind you spawned from." And with that, Corone morphs into the pink Galaxy Ranger. Astronomer commands the Psychos to attack the Space Rangers, and after a brief look amongst each other, the four Psychos obey, leaving Corone and Astronomer to circle each other. "I never really thought of us as pink people, but this colour is growing on me," Astronomer smiles. "There is no us," Corone bristles. "You're right, there's only me." Astronomer begins her attack in earnest, and the fighting continues in the background as we pan over to the Psychos engaging the Space Rangers. After batting away Zane, Psycho Red locks up with Andros. "I'm going to kill you for what you've done to my sister," Andros says. "As much as I'd like to see you try, this wasn't my plan." Andros' confused face is visible through his visor as Psycho Red grapples him to the floor, explaining that while he did want to resurrect his family, it was ultimately twisted, first by Trek and now Astronomer. Psycho Red continues to fight with Andros as he explains how his views on Corone have shifted, if only slightly. He thought he could trick her into becoming Psycho Pink, or at least gain the power to create another Pink himself. But between their original personalities coming to the fore and Corone's infectious goodness, the reborn Neji crew has changed in small but significant ways. "I still want to kill you, for the record, but right now the only thing I want more is to see Trek's plan fall apart." Psycho Red punctuates the point by delivering the blow that demorphs Andros. The other Psychos dispatch their opponents quick enough and turn to watch the fight between Corone and Astronomer. "So, who are we supposed to root for, Red?" Perrine asks genuinely, but San stays silent, glaring at Corone as she fights on. The fight between Corone and Astronomer is becoming more and more one-sided as Astronomer presses her attack, though both have suffered damage. The last hit shatters Corone's visor, exposing a portion of her beaten face, and sends her reeling. Astronomer laughs as Corone struggles to her feet. As she goes to deliver the final blow, her staff is caught by another blade, Psycho Red's. Before Astronomer can protest, she's cut off with a blow to the face with the knuckle guard of Psycho Red's blade. "On your feet, Corone, you're not done until I say so," Psycho Red growls, and Corone begins to rise faster. The other Psychos dogpile on Astronomer while Corone recovers herself and marvels at their teamwork. Astronomer screams at the traitors that she's going to enjoy killing them all over again, just to bring them back and do it again and again. She unleashes a pulse of dark energy that knocks the Psychos back and demorphs them. The sound of Astronomer's laughter and the sight of these four beings suffering at her own hands once more drives Corone over the edge. She cries out as she charges Astronomer, becoming engulfed in the shining lights of Orion. Astronomer equally yells as she swings her makeshift staff down at Corone, who shatters it with her new powered up Quasar Saber. I may not be stronger than you, faster than you, or smarter than you, Corone defiantly screams, Astronomer firing all of her energy at Corone, but to no avail, until she's finally struck with a beaming slash of energy and falls to the ground. But I'm Corone, and you will never hurt anyone ever again. Corone demorphs and is joined by the battered Neji crew as Astronomer lies dying before them. Andros manages to get up and close enough to see the final moments of Astronomer as Corone kneels beside her, takes her hand and silently whispers something that seems to make Astronomer smirk before she evaporates into energy particulates and fades away forever. Is it over? Andros asks, approaching Corone and the Neji crew. Corone, with a sad but satisfied smile, says yes, and the rest of the Space Rangers, all looking a little worse for wear, begin to stir. I think that's our cue to leave, Hera points out, already heading back to the Neji with Porine. I'll bet it'll kill them when they find out that we're the heroes this time, Porine cackles. Andros tries to interject but stumbles, still injured. Corone moves to support her brother and looks to Griff and San, saying they'll probably have a 5-minute head start. Griff salutes Corone with a small smile and leaves. Corone goes to thank San, but he scoffs. He didn't save her for thanks. He knew she was the only one who could kill Astronomer, and she did. She also brought back his siblings, but she shouldn't be expecting any thanks. They're even now, which means they're back to being enemies. Even while saying this, he gives a respectful nod. Andros again weakly tries to stop him, but San just laughs and says, "Kill you later, Red," before joining the other Neji crew. The Neji's engines fire up and the ship takes off as the other Space Rangers join Corone and Andros. They bombard the pair with questions about where Astronomer is and why they're letting the Psychos go, but as Andros turns to yell at Corone for her actions, she embraces him, saying that it's over and they can finally move on. Andros admits that they wouldn't really be able to stop the Psychos in their current state, and repeats Corone's statement that they can have a 5-minute head start for now. The Space Rangers hobble their way back to the Astro megaship as Andros asks Corone what she whispered to Astronomer. Corone simply smiles to herself content. In an epilogue, the Neji is travelling through space and the crew are discussing their next course of action. While Porine and Griff muse on the implications of them turning to the side of good, or at the very least the side of not as evil, Hera reports of an energy spike in the ship's mess hall, and the crew go to investigate, morphing into their psycho forms. They are met by an unassuming, mild-mannered man in a lab coat who greets them pleasantly. When questioned, he introduces himself as Mr. Ashford and explains that he has heard a great deal about the infamous Psycho Rangers, and, extending his hand forward, that he is there to propose an alliance. Okay, so how was that for you? Was it good? I hope it was good. I hope it comes out good. I really hope it comes out good. And I know I am going to be slated by certain vocal elements of the fandom, and probably rightly so. But, you know, like, if you don't like it, write something yourself. And that's what I did. So I hope people enjoy it. I know some people are going to hate what I did with the New Powers teams, but considering that I've put them to more use than Super Megaforce did, and actually add them into the lore in a way that makes sense why they haven't been brought up. And I would backtrack on that a little if I was doing more stories. Like, obviously the ending involves Mr. Ashford, which would lead into a story involving the Hyperforce Rangers. I would probably establish the New Powers teams a little better in that as well, by showing their continued legacy and that they are not just gone forever. But yeah, I liked the way my story went. I know that sounds a little biased, but hey ho. And I'll probably get a couple comments about the fact that I added another OC Donut Steel Ranger into Boom's already extensive catalogue of OC Donut Steel Rangers, but it's Boom Studios Power Rangers. Why can't I add my own OC Donut Steel Ranger? And if you would like to see me do something more with this, if you would like to see me expand on this story further, if you would like to see what I would do with the Hyperforce team, considering they're not getting a season 2, unfortunately, from everything I've seen, which is a shame because I love all those characters and I would really love to see more of them in the universe. But if you would like to see more of that, if you'd like to comment on what I've written for this episode, if you would like to give me hate for what I've done in this episode, by all means, leave your comments and questions below in the comments, and I will be more than happy to address them. And yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I'll catch you guys next time.